Welcome into the Locked On Knicks podcast. Today, we rank the Knicks assets 1 to 30 bajillion. Seriously, we're going to talk about a lot of picks, a lot of players, all that next on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Knicks, and today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for first deposit match up to $100. I want to thank you for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day, and we want to thank you for being an everydayer. And if you're struggling to do that, there's some ways to help. You can subscribe and hit that notifications bell to ensure you never miss an episode on YouTube, and then hit that notifications bell, or I guess the auto download function, to make sure you don't miss it on the podcast side of things. I'm Gavin, Schall, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster. He is Alex Wolfe, editor-in-chief of the Strickland, the greatest Knicks website in the whole wide world. And today we get to one of those annual off-season traditions. We will at some point certainly do our future rankings. But for now, just because we're talking trade, I feel like, or talking trades rather, so often, I always feel like it's worth it to do an asset ranking. So essentially, our version of a Bill Simmons trade value column with only the Knicks. How much would each player on the Knicks be worth to other teams? Who's worth the most? Who's worth the least? We dub it asset rankings, not player rankings or trade rankings, because we also include picks in this. Basically, if the Knicks do need to trade for a star, what holds the most value both to the Knicks and other teams? What would the Knicks get back if they were traded as one player? And it's an interesting thing to juggle in this. And what I found, Alex, more so even than in past years when doing this, what is the difference between one guy who would be worth a lot to 2 or 3 teams, or a player who could potentially be worth a medium amount to 30 teams? So there's a lot to think about. Something neither of us had to think about. The player who was number one on this list, Alex, who's number one in the asset rankings this year?
Yeah, I don't think it's any secret to say that Jalen Brunson is number one, and also the guy that we least expect to see get traded, but he's on one of the best value contracts in the NBA. He's the best player on the Knicks. He is probably one of the top 10, perhaps top 5 best players in the entire NBA right now. So yeah, I don't think it's a hot take to say that he is both the number one trade asset on the Knicks and also the guy least likely to be traded. He is the one that you build around, so he's the number one asset for a reason. I figured before we get into the rest of the ranking, I could probably just give a brief explanation of what picks the Knicks have available to them as well. Players, pretty self-explanatory. We already know who's on the team, who's a free agent. So we'll add caveats to that as we bring up certain players of like, well, if this player gets re-signed, then this is, of course, where they would land. But as far as picks, this year's draft, they've picked 24, 25 in the first round, and then picked 38 in the second round as of right this second. Then next year, on paper, looks like a loaded year, but actually is not the most loaded in the world when you take into consideration the protections on picks. So the Knicks have their own pick for every year, their own first round pick every year from now until the end of when they're allowed to trade picks, which is 2031. So we can just knock that out of there right now. So 2025 to 2031, every Knicks draft pick is accounted for in the first round. Then next year they have Detroit's 2025 first round pick, but it is protected from picks 1 to 13 next year, 1 to 11 in 2026, 1 to 9 in 2027. And then if Detroit is not given a first-round pick to the Knicks by 2027, then they will instead give their 2027 second-round pick to the Knicks. Milwaukee owes their first-round pick to the Knicks, and that is only if it falls from picks 5 to 30. So if their pick falls between 5 and 30, which I would say is very likely, then it goes to the Knicks. If it goes to pick 1 to 4, then it actually goes to New Orleans. So worth noting there, but probably less likely. So the Knicks, for all intents and purposes, probably have Milwaukee's pick next year, unless something happens, which we've seen. We saw that happen with Dallas's pick last year. Thought it was probably a sure thing, and then wound up losing a top 10 pick out of it because they tanked their way to it. But there's no real incentive for Milwaukee to tank it because they don't get it regardless. Then they also have Washington's first round pick in a similar situation to that Detroit pick. It's protected 1 to 10 next year, 1 to 8 in 2026. And then if Washington is not conveyed a pick to the Knicks by 2026, then they will give up their 2026 and 2027 second round picks to the Knicks. Then the Knicks have they don't have their own second round pick next year because of the Jalen Brunson tampering, but they do have Brooklyn and Detroit's 2025 second round picks, which both should be pretty valuable based off where those teams finished. Then going forward, the second round picks are a little bit all over the place, but I'll give them as quick as possible. So 2026, there's a very convoluted who gets first, second, third pick scenario of a various amount of second round picks, but basically they'll probably end up with Minnesota's second in 2026. They have their own second in 2027. They have the worst of Phoenix or Indy's second in 2028. They have the worst of Indy or Washington second in 2029, and then they have their own in 2030 and 2031. So that is the pick situation for the Knicks going forward, just so everyone's aware of what's going on there before we start getting into these rankings.
Yeah, so they're going to be coming up very, very quickly as we go through. But the one other player I had above picks, and I decided just for the sake of interest to include OG Anunoby and Isaiah Hartenstein in this. Obviously, it's very difficult to do that when there's no guarantee, particularly with Hartenstein, that either one is going to be on the Knicks next year. But for the sake of interest, for the sake of podcasting, I presume they would sign what I would consider in the case of Anunoby, and just because of the limit on how much Hartenstein can make, value contracts for the Knicks. So OG, I had in our dream world where he signs for $35 million a year, signing back on a 4-year for $140 million contract. We've seen past discourse of the Raptors turning down 3 picks for him. We never really got full clarification on 3 first-round picks, I should say, full clarification on if those were unprotected or those had slight protections on them. Given what he was traded for, RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickley, a very generous second-round pick from the Detroit Pistons, I think it's reasonable to assert him at this value level. And despite continued injury woes from him, I think it's possible his value only increased on the Knicks because he showed he is absolutely a game changer in terms of his ability to turn a team from good to great in a way that just wasn't quite accessible to the Raptors because they didn't have that Jalen Brunson-esque primary creator. So maybe that limits the teams that would trade for him. But if you do have an elite top 10 player in the league and you want to make your team better, OG Anunoby is a pretty good way to do it. But Alex, would you agree with that assertion that he's more valuable, than some of those far out first round picks unprotected that essentially are like theoretical gold in the NBA?
Oh, absolutely. He's definitely more valuable because I think he is, if the Knicks for whatever reason decided in the next 2 years they had to blow it up, whether it's luxury tax or whatever, he's the guy that I think, some team that is trying to contend would, jump at the chance to bring to their team because he's a game changer in that regard. We saw with the Knicks this year, he took them from a good team to a great team overnight, just with what he brings to the table, the defense where he can guard presumably 1 to 5, depending on the team and the player, obviously. But, other than maybe like the very fastest, quickest guards in the league, he can guard pretty much anyone on the floor at any given time. And we saw that bear out this year at various times with the Knicks. And then, I think, if you're a team that is looking to take that next step, I have Julius Randle ranked a little higher than you do, which we'll get to in a minute. But I think, if you're looking at the two of them, you might say well, Julius is like the all-star. He's the multi-time all-NBA guy and, whatever. And I agree with that. And I think that, he's very valuable in his own respect. But I just think the teams that would be looking to make a trade, I feel like would go more for an OG Anunoby type than a Julius Randle type. And OG might actually fetch more, even if he's not raw talent and stats numbers as talented as Julius Randle. I just think that he brings that finishing skill set to a potential contender to the point where they would be yeah, I think he's more valuable to me.
Yeah, I think it's a totally fair argument, and he is just a cleaner fit, and that is kind of the discussion point, the inflection point with Randle that we got into when we did sort of a whole deep dive on him and what his value is around the league, where he's ultra talented, but he's also he's very, very specific, right? In the eye of the right beholder, he is a game changer to, I would say, the majority of the NBA. Not that he's untouchable, but he is just not worth the allocation, less so of money and more so of shots and I guess offensive resources that you have to pour into him for him to be the best version of himself. But we're going to get into that debate next on Locked On Knicks when we continue discussing our 2024 offseason asset rankings.
But first, we got to let you know about our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs. And when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. And LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. And LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. And hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. And that's why LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. That's why 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, Gavin, we're back in and talking through this asset ranking. So we both were consensus on Jalen Brunson and OG Anunoby being 1-2. Now, this is where things are going to start to get different right away. And I'll say right now, I have Julius Randle at number 3. We ranked things slightly differently. I lumped a bunch of different picks together. So it makes our ranking slightly different as far as like the actual number of them. But you had Julius Randle down at number 8 on your ranking, below a lot of Knicks picks after OG Anunoby. I'm kind of curious your rationale there, because I don't know, kind of like what we were saying in the last segment, like, or at least what I was saying, like, I think Randle does still have a ton of skill. I wonder if it would be challenging to find the team that would be the one that would like want to go after him. But I do think there would be some team, that needs like a second star. Like, it would be a team that's found their guy in like the draft. I feel like I don't know exactly what team this would be. Maybe it's like a San Antonio-esque team, something like that. That's like, oh, we have Wembanyama, but now we need another star, and we need someone else that can soak up usage, make his life easier, that can score, that can rebound, that can pass the ball, that can defend when we need him to. And I think Randle does check all those boxes. So I think that like if you ran into a team like a San Antonio, they'd probably be like, oh, we'll give you some young players plus like, maybe one unprotected pick and one like protected pick or something like that. And I think that's a pretty valuable package back for Julius Randle, which to me would be worth a little more than like one of their unprotected firsts going forward. But where do you stand on that as far as the picks versus Randle?
Yeah, thinking it through, I might have him a little too low, and you might be right. I guess my counterpoint was just because I see those far out first round picks. Like, I always think that for years the Suns had, I can't remember what it ended up turning into, but the Heat's unprotected first. And it was, and I at the time I was in college, I was covering the team, and Ryan McDonough, the ill-fated, who I really like as an individual, general manager at the time, like he would always reference that, like that pick in their coffers, and it just always stuck in my head. And you just don't see those picks traded very often. They really generally are only the fodder of superstar trades, right? Like James Harden to the Nets, where you see an unprotected first going out 5-6 years down the road, just because that pick could be anything. And I think I don't necessarily agree with this logic, but I think GMs often talk themselves into the idea that like it's like a mystery box in forget in Jackbox, where you is Jackbox where you throw the football and you assign points? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
I always think of the Family Guy reference back in the day when he buys the mystery, or when he takes the mystery box instead of the boat or whatever.
Randle. Yeah.
And he goes,
so
the mystery box could be anything. It could even be a boat.
Right. Yeah. So that's I can't believe I'm forgetting the name of that game. But that's where I'm going with this. Like, I just think teams value those picks so highly. Like, the question, what you were getting at there, and you pretty much said as much, like, would another team trade a first round pick at least 4 years out, totally unprotected, for Julius Randle? And maybe a team like the Spurs would, or a team like the Thunder, who are just pretty self-assured, saying, hey, as long as our best player does not suffer like a tragic injury that year, this is not going to be a top 5 pick. And this is Julius Randle is an all NBA caliber player who is going to help us immensely right now. It just comes down to those teams believing in Randle enough that they want to allocate the necessary money to pay him down the road. And the Spurs are a team I'm going to bring up a bunch during this. I think they are the perfect answer to that question, to them being like, yeah, like he would make us way better right away. He would make Wembanyama way better right away. Wembanyama covers up for a lot of his weaknesses. So yeah, that would make a lot of sense. So if there's even one team out there that I would say we would give you a distant first round pick plus for Julius Randle, plus the other variable is like, how much do other teams believe in the Knicks front office? And we had Howard Beck on to like talk about this like for 2 episodes, that there is a respect around the NBA for what the Knicks can do. And that's really nice, but it also does hurt the value of their future first. Where in the past, Alex, I think a Knicks pick unprotected 5 years down the road was like borderline worth a superstar player, because like odds were it was going to be a top 10 pick, and knowing the Knicks luck, it was going to be a top 5 pick that inevitably turned into someone like Jamal Murray. But given the newfound respect for the Knicks, maybe those picks are a little bit lower. So just to clarify on my list, I had 2030, 2029, 2028, 2031, 2027, all ahead of Julius Randle. If I were to revise that, maybe I'd put him like up to 5th on that list, maybe just behind the 2030, 20, and 29. I thought those two were the best mix of being close enough in the future that a GM could use them, but far enough out that Jalen Brunson would be safely out of his prime. I'm not sure. It's a very, very hard thing to measure, but I think all those things have approximately equal value to me.
Yeah, I think that's where, when I was starting to look at this situation, so on my list, I put the 2028 to 31 unprotected firsts all just kind of together in one category. I think they're all roughly worth about the same to me in terms of negotiation, because I just think you look at those and you look at the extensions that Jalen Brunson and also Julius Randle are, well, less so Julius Randle. We just talked about that recently if you haven't listened to those episodes yet. But, Jalen Brunson is rumored to be signing a 4-year extension this summer. So that would mean he's still covered for this coming season of 2024 to 25. So then he would be covered through 25, 26, 26, 27, and 27, 28. And perhaps even if there was an option year through 29. But, if I'm an opposing GM, I'm looking at and saying, okay, he's probably going to sign a 3+1. So 2028 would be that first year where, like, if things are starting to hit the fan for the Knicks, like, that would maybe be where it would happen. I think they're going to be pretty safe, or at least like their picks are going to feel very safe, which is to say unattractive in trades through about 2027 is my general thought, just based off of that. Because I think, as we saw this year in the playoffs, like, as long as you have Jalen Brunson on your team, like, you got a shot, as long as he's healthy and as long as he can play as well as he can play, which I don't see any reason to think that he wouldn't be able to keep this level of play up for at least another like 4 years, based off, the fact that he plays a pretty below the rim style, and it's all just based on craft and guile. And, there's some initial burst involved, but it's mostly just, getting guys stranded on his hip and, working from there. So I think that for me, that's why I kind of ranked them all together like that. And I also, maybe this would be a good opportunity to talk about this now or in the next segment, but I had Deuce McBride ahead of those picks too, because I just think the combination of what he's becoming as far as a 3-and-D role player, plus the huge value of his contract. I think if you went to throw him into a deal, you might run into a situation almost like what the Knicks did with Manuel Quickley and RJ Barrett in that trade for OG Anunoby, where you could probably sub him into any given deal as like a pick and a half. If you were going to like pick out what his value was in any given trade, I think you could look at him and be like, yeah, Deuce McBride is worth about 1.5 first round picks at this point, just because of the production you can get and the fact, he's locked in for another 3 years on just an absolute bargain contract. It's like getting a second go at a rookie contract player when they're beyond being a rookie and are already developing pretty well.
Yeah, so this one I totally disagreed with you on. I guess my premise would be just like, give me the team in the NBA that would trade an unprotected first for Deuce McBride. And this is, to be clear, like not a shot at Deuce, because he's just a gutty shot maker, totally unafraid in the playoffs, good defender, maybe not like the otherworldly elite defender, like at his size, like we were hoping he would be, like what we saw in smaller stretches, but he is an undeniably very good defender. I just don't think he's a starter for most teams, just because of like the issue we always talk about with him. Like, he is point guard size, but he does not have a point guard skill set. And there are teams in the league that can make that work. Like typically with big initiators, the Lakers with LeBron, you could slot him in there. He'd be great for that team. The Mavs with Luka, you could slot him in there, be great for that team. And maybe some teams that are like already like very solidly in contention would, to answer my own question. I think right away of like the Denver Nuggets and or the Celtics, who have all like most of their picks going forward, and particularly with the Nuggets desperately need bench help. That is probably the team that would do it. So maybe that's the case for it. I just think there are very few teams that would give up an unprotected first, when in turn, I think the Knicks unprotected first like hold on average more value than what Deuce would bring to the table. But I was curious that you put him there. So like, I'm interested. And I guess the argument does just come down to the fact that it's undeniably a great contract.
Well, so let me, I have some nerdy thoughts about why, particularly with this contract, he might be more valuable to a more contending team, and why they might be willing to, if they're a team that's already leveraged on picks anyway, they would maybe be willing to trade that for Deuce McBride. But we'll get to that in just a second when we get back in on Locked On Knicks.
But first, we want to tell you about our good friends over at PrizePicks. You might be at home asking, what is PrizePicks? Well, I'm going to tell you, PrizePicks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 5 million members. It is the most fun and exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. So all you have to do is pick more or less on 2 or more player stats for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. With PrizePicks, you can turn $10 into $1,000 in a single game. Watching your favorite sports this summer, you can make a PrizePicks lineup with as little as 60 seconds. You just need to pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you're locked in. If you're looking for promotions, PrizePicks has you covered every single week for lowering select player stat projections on Tuesday, which increases your chance of getting a win, to getting your entry fees back if you have a losing lineup on Fridays. In June, there's always action on PrizePicks. This is a perfect time to try something out as basketball is winding down. Make sure to try out esports this month, because for every Wednesday and Saturday in June, if your lineup doesn't win, you'll get your entry fee back. Choose from Counter-Strike 2, Call of Duty, League of Legends, and more. PrizePicks is truly the best. If you download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA, you can get a first deposit match up to $100. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, pick more, pick less. It's that easy. All right, Alex, I'm going to throw it right back to you. Give me the case on Deuce McBride and a contender. Making a Knick an offer, because I think the case you're making here, having it ahead of the first, an unprotected first plus for Deuce McBride.
Yeah. So my thought is, if I'm a team like you said, the Nuggets or the Lakers or the Mavs, or one of these teams that has already leveraged out most of the picks that I can already, and now just needs kind of those finishing pieces, but also want to extend my window, because what happens when you've already leveraged out your team, with picks and stuff, is you're probably bringing in high price players to do that, which then means that you're going to, inevitably start butting up against the luxury tax aprons, which we've been talking about extensively this offseason. I think are going to become, starting this offseason and going forward, it's going to become way more part of the calculus going forward. I think we're already seeing teams start to factor that in a bit. And, we're going to start hearing about it more in the mainstream, because it's going to start. I mean, there's going to be some stories probably written this offseason about teams that had to actively make decisions to make their team worse because they're paying their players too much. And it was going to affect their ability to be flexible going forward and potentially harm their draft picks and everything else. So I think Deuce McBride is kind of he's sort of the perfect player for a team that's already kind of leveraged out to bring in if they need a finishing piece, because most of the time you're kind of cobbling together an offer of some of your end of bench guys to try to make salary work to get someone who makes more money, take advantage of the 120% trade rule, and take back more salary. Considering that Deuce makes it's going to be like $4.5 to $5 million next year, and then scaling down to under $4 million by the third year of his deal, of the new extension they signed. I mean, I think if you can get the version of him that came out post All-Star break, which was a guy that scored 12 points, dished about 3 assists, shot 41% from 3 on decent volume, and then we obviously saw how much he contributed in the playoffs as well. Had some pretty big performances, particularly against Philly, that really helped the Knicks out. I think if you're looking at that guy and you're thinking, okay, maybe this guy's like the next Pat Beverly or whatever, or slightly better than Pat Beverly, even because, he just seems like a little more consistent of a shooter, then, considering his age and everything, he's only going to be 23 next year. I think that screams to me like some team would be like, heck yeah, we'll give you like a whatever our furthest out first we can give you because we need a role player, and then we'll also throw in like whatever second rounder we can throw in there, which again, I think levels out to about 1.5 first round picks. So, but that's just my opinion. Like I think guys on value contracts like that are going to be so rare now, though, that in the next 2-3 years, if the Knicks went to trade Deuce, they would probably have a line of suitors like half the NBA long to try to bring him on, because I just think players that can play that well and play like 20 minutes off the bench or whatever for you and only make like that small of a piece of the pie, they're going to be worth their weight in gold soon.
No, it's a great argument, and to your point, every year that contract gets more valuable. I mean, $4 million for a rotation player is a joke. Not to keep crapping on Deuce's agent, but it's a crazy contract. All right, so for me, I listed the first. I had Julius, and then I think you're right on the 2027 call. So with an edit, I'd probably have 2027, 2026, 2025 Knicks unprotected first, and then before getting into the first that the Knicks are owed down the road from the Pistons, Wizards, and Bucks. I had 4 players. I think we maybe like we'll end up splitting this into part 2. And we have time to talk about 1 or 2 of them. I had Isaiah Hartenstein as my next guy up, slightly over Donte DiVincenzo and Josh Hart. And I don't really know how to feel about it, because he's like, if he gets the maximum amount he could make, he would essentially be making the same as Hart and like a little bit more than DiVincenzo. And I'm kind of questioning in real time, like is he worth the most of these 3 guys? Just because DiVincenzo's skill set is sort of the most translatable out of the 3. Like there's just not a team in the league he doesn't fit on. Hart like was pretty clearly the Knicks' second best player in that Sixers series, and beating a team as talented as the Sixers, you being the second best guy in a series wins like that just screams value. But Hartenstein like just turned himself legitimately into a top 10 to 15 defender in the NBA, and that skill is maybe even more valuable than Donte's 3-point shooting, maybe even more valuable than Hart's ridiculous rebounding and transition game. And the fact that he is like, just like can be like, maybe not the center of your offense, but like a co-center of your offense with his passing ability to some extent, if like with the caveat that you have someone like a Brunson that draws so much attention to give him room. Like there are limits to his game, but he is just so incredibly helpful. And I think like in a world where the Knicks lose him, which like could potentially be increasingly likely, I think we'll very much see his value in a bad way, because it's really, really going to affect the Knicks next season.
Yeah, I have those 3 all ranked in various ways as well in my next few numbers. I mean, so just to recap where I'm at so far, I've got Brunson, Anunoby, Randle, Deuce, and then the 28 to 31 picks all ranked there. So I have Donte next. I just think, to me, he's the next guy. And maybe this is our, I think we're probably going to cut this show off in a minute and save the rest for tomorrow, because it's definitely a 2-episode long discussion. But maybe that is kind of the crux of what we get into in the next episode. But I think Donte, with his contract, again, you're talking about a guy who's going to make less than 10% of the salary cap guaranteed for his entire deal, because he's making, I think by the time his deal is up, he'll be making like 13 million or something like that. I'm going to double check that right now. His deal this year was 10.9 million. Next year will be 11.5. Year after that will be about 12 million. And then the most he makes is 12.5 million, which is significantly less than out of those 2 other guys in Hart and Hartenstein. And I think that not every team would be looking for a Hartenstein type player. I think every single team in the NBA is looking for a Donte DiVincenzo. They want guys like that. And the fact that he is better than passable on defense, he looks downright good on defense sometimes, and then is also a 3-point shooter that you can only talk about in the same breath as Steph Curry and Luka Doncic this year, because he's number 3 behind those 2 guys, both in takes and makes from 3 this season. And that includes spending the first 15 to 20 games of the season only playing like 10 minutes a game, as we saw when he got eliminated from Most Improved Player, and the possibility of getting that award. I mean, I think every single team in the NBA would line up to get him. And I mean, I almost wonder if I have him too low, and if he should be ahead of the 2028 to 31 picks, because he's another guy that, because of how little he makes and everything else, I could see if the Knicks made him available and said the asking price is 2 first-round picks, unprotected at some point, some contender would probably be like, sure, like we'll do that, because he could potentially be the finishing piece to a championship with that level of shooting. And most importantly, he didn't fully finish it off this year, as far as like getting rid of his rep as like a guy that fades in the playoffs, but he went a long way towards dispelling that. He had some really big moments in the playoffs. He wasn't perfect, but he also wasn't a dumpster fire in the playoffs, which I think was sort of his rep going into this, was that he had either been hurt or had just been bad in the playoffs prior to this year with the Knicks. And then this year came in, it was an overwhelming positive for the most part in the playoffs. So I think for that reason, yeah, he's the top of those 3 guys for me, and the guy that kind of leads the charge out of like the well, I guess Deuce is my top role player, but Donte, it just based off his super bargain contract, but Donte leads my next class of role players, I think, after that.
Yeah, I think it's a totally fair argument. I'm open to having those 3 in any order. I think my logic was that, like, I think you undeniably know there's a team out there that would give 2 first-round picks for Hartenstein, and that's the Thunder. And that's where this exercise, like you kind of have to go into fantasy land, because if the Knicks signed him for 4 for 72, they would then be royally screwing him by trading him to the Thunder, a team that would have just given him maybe $25 million a year. And that's generally not how the Knicks pay back loyalty. And this is a little tangent, but if I'm Hartenstein and I'm re-signing with the Knicks, I'm saying, I'll do it. I want a no trade clause, which is something that does not happen for non-superstars in the NBA. But I think Hartenstein has a rare bit of leverage in that he could get up to 8, maybe. I wouldn't go so far as to say 10, but I would say 8 would probably be the ceiling, $8 million more a year from another team. And if I'm him, I'm saying, hey, I'll do this. No trade clause though. Like you're getting me at an absolute steal of a contract. If it was 4 for 72, I get to stay in New York unless I want to leave New York. And if I'm the Knicks, I'm saying, heck yeah, man, you totally fair deal. So that's a little bit of a tangent, but Donte, I think has universal value. I was trying to measure this by peak value. And I think Hartenstein's might be a notch higher, but you could totally be right. Like the dude was the 3rd best 3-point shooter in basketball this year. I think like I'll take it a step further. I think he essentially did dispel like his playoff rep. Like he played through how he was perceived coming into this year extraordinarily well. Like it will never be appreciated. And sure, the pressure was off because the game was essentially over, but him dropping 38, 39 points in a closeout game, like versus the Pacers, like even if some of it was in garbage time, like that's extraordinary for a guy making that kind of money, for like having multiple 25 plus point games where he was hitting 7 or 8 threes. Like that, the ceiling is high and the floor is very, very solid with him. And that's a great combination. And Josh Hart, like maybe we'll get into more next episode. Like he's an absolute game changer in his own right. So we'll wrap up for today. We'll leave some meat on the bone, but we will come back tomorrow and finish up this trade value or asset value rankings. I got ahead of myself. We're going to talk about all the other picks the Knicks have. Maybe we'll revisit this debate a little bit. Mitchell Robinson, where does he fit in? Where does Rokas Jokubaitis, the rights to him, fit in? Bojan Bogdanovic, Precious Achiuwa if he's back, 2nd round picks, all that and so much more next time on Locked On Knicks.